isolating, whatever. We're both long-term peace and climate activists. We're both long-time members of Peace Action. And I wanted to start by welcoming everyone and thanking you for coming and being a part of this conversation. I'm going to ask everyone to mute themselves unless I call on you to speak, so that your face doesn't come into the center of the screen for people who have the speaker view, because we have a lot of people. And this is a meeting, not a webinar, because we want to give an opportunity for people to talk to each other. And but I want to start by saying how hard this time is, how stressful, how difficult, how frightening it is. And it gives me strength to see all the people who are coming here together. I just want to take a deep breath and let's just realize that this is really a challenge. This is a challenge. This is a moment when we really see what's important, what are our values, who we are, how we take care of each other, how we take care of ourselves, what it means to face a crisis of this magnitude, and how we can come through this crisis together with our dignity intact, with our values intact, and maybe even how we can come together to build a world that's in keeping with who we are and who we want to be on this planet. So I was inspired to show this movie that Naomi Klein has produced. And the movie, one of the things she states in the movie is that during moments of cataclysmic change, the previously unthinkable suddenly becomes reality. And in recent decades, that change has mainly been for the worst, but it doesn't have to be for the worst. This video is about how we can remake our sense of what is possible, because we don't want to leave this world to our children, to our grandchildren. We want to create out of this cataclysmic, seismic tragedy, the potential for a seismic opportunity. So I'm going to start the video now.
Ideas that are lying around. Friedman, one of history's most extreme free market economists, was wrong about a whole lot, but he was right about that. In times of crisis, seemingly impossible ideas suddenly become possible. But whose ideas? Sensible, fair ones, designed to keep as many people as possible safe, secure, and healthy? Or predatory ideas, designed to further enrich the already unimaginably wealthy while leaving the most vulnerable further exposed? The world economy is seizing up in the face of cascading shocks.
COVID-19 can be characterized as a pandemic.
In the wake of the coronavirus crisis, stocks have stopped trading on Wall Street after a 7% drop.
This is a historical day, the biggest drop we've seen since that crash in 1987.
The drop was spurred by a growing oil price war as the market was already weakened by coronavirus fears.
Yeah, no, I don't take responsibility at all.
In the midst of this widespread panic, corporate lobbyists of all stripes are, of course, dusting off all the ideas they had lying around. Trump is pushing a suspension of the payroll tax, which could bankrupt Social Security, providing the excuse to cut it or privatize it completely, an idea that has been lying around for a very long time.
A worker at his or her option ought to be allowed to put some of their own money in a in a private savings account.
Lying around on both sides of the aisle.
When I argued that we should freeze federal spending, I meant Social Security as well. I meant Medicare and Medicaid.
And then there are the ideas being floated to bail out some of the wealthiest and most polluting sectors in our economy.
We are working very closely with the cruise line industry, likewise with the airline industry. They're two great industries, and we'll be helping them through this patch.
Bailouts for fracking companies, not to mention cruise ships, airlines, and hotels, handouts which Trump could benefit from personally. Which is a big problem because the virus isn't the only crisis we face. There's also climate disruption, and these industries that are getting rescued with our money are the ones driving it. Trump has also been meeting with the private health insurers.
We're meeting with the top executives of the health insurance companies.
The very ones who have made sure that so many Americans can't afford the care they need. And what are the chances they don't have their hands out? It seems like the whole pandemic is getting outsourced.
Well, Mr. President, thank you for inviting us here today, along with our colleagues from Walmart and Walgreens and our partners at CVS. Normally, you view us as competitors, but today we're focused on a common competitor, and that's defeating the spread of the coronavirus.
The Fed's first move was to pump $1.5 trillion into the financial markets, with more undoubtedly on the way. But if you're a worker, especially a gig worker, there's a very good chance you're out of luck. If you do need to see a doctor for care, there's a good chance no one's going to help you pay if you aren't covered. And if you want to heed the public health warnings to stay home from work, there's also a chance that you won't get paid. Of course, you still need to pay your rent and all of your debts, medical, student credit card, mortgage. The results are predictable. Too many sick people have no choice but to go to work, which means more people contracting and spreading the virus. And without comprehensive bailouts for workers, we can expect more bankruptcies and more homelessness down the road. Look, we know this script. In 2008, the last time we had a global financial meltdown, the same kinds of bad ideas for no strings attached corporate bailouts carried the day. And regular people around the world paid the price. And even that was entirely predictable. 13 years ago, I wrote a book called The Shock Doctrine, The Rise of Disaster Capitalism. It described a brutal and recurring tactic by right-wing governments. After a shocking event, a war, coup, terrorist attack, market crash, or natural disaster, they exploit the public's disorientation, suspend democracy, push through radical free market policies that enrich the 1% at the expense of the poor and middle class. But here is what my research has taught me. Shocks and crises don't always go the shock doctrine path. In fact, it's possible for crisis to catalyze a kind of evolutionary leap. Think of the 1930s, when the Great Depression led to the New Deal.
The only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
In the United States and elsewhere, governments began to weave a social safety net so that the next time there was a crash, there would be programs like Social Security to catch people.
The right of every family to a decent home, the right to adequate medical care, and the opportunity to achieve and enjoy good health.
Look, we know what Trump's plan is. A pandemic shock doctrine featuring all the most dangerous ideas lying around, from privatizing Social Security to locking down borders to caging even more migrants. Hell, he might even try canceling elections. But the end of this story hasn't been written yet. It is an election year, and social movements and insurgent politicians are already mobilized. And like in the 1930s, we have a whole bunch of other ideas lying around.
Do we believe that everybody should be entitled as a right to health care?
We will not stop organizing and fighting until all unhoused folks who want shelter have shelter. Canceling student debt.
It makes so much sense that if you're sick, that you should not be penalized where you don't have an income.
Many of these ideas were dismissed as too radical just a week ago. Now they're starting to seem like the only reasonable path to get out of this crisis and prevent future ones.
Now, here's something that helps explain the difference between the testing situation in South Korea and the US. The South Korea, like European countries and Canada, has universal single-payer insurance. And that means that it's easier to mobilize, and also people know what to do. There is pretty much one answer for how to get testing. The US is a patchwork of countless different systems, and so you can't say, here's exactly the steps that every American should take in order to get tested.
And with Washington suddenly in the giant stimulus business, this is precisely the time for the stimulus that many of us have been talking about for years.
Today is the day that we truly embark on a comprehensive agenda of economic, social, and racial justice in the United States of America.
It's called the Green New Deal. Instead of rescuing the dirty industries of the last century, we should be boosting the clean ones that will lead us into safety in the coming century. If there is one thing history teaches us, it's that moments of shock are profoundly volatile. We either lose a whole lot of ground, get fleeced by elites, and pay the price for decades, or we win progressive victories that seemed impossible just a few weeks earlier. This is no time to lose our nerve. The future will be determined by whoever is willing to fight harder for the ideas they have lying around.
Oh, good. I think I got it.
So, what are the ideas that are lying around? Not up, but ideas about what we want to build. How do we work together? How do we get the political nerve, the cohesion, the coordination? How do we leverage our power as citizens to make the politically previously impossible, the politically inevitable? So I want to introduce my husband, Gordon Thompson.
Hi, guys.
And he's going to talk a little bit about integrated strategy. And at some point, we'll put up a slide that helps us think in terms of how we might think about integrating different levels of strategy to create a real movement for change. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Paula. Good afternoon, everybody. The COVID crisis is showing us clearly that our society is out of balance internally, and it's out of balance with nature. And to fix that going forward, we need an integrated strategy, a broad scope integrated strategy. And a group that understands this very well is the Sunrise movement. And I strongly recommend that you take the Sunrise School. And their strategy is integrated in a couple senses. One is that they have a broad set of objectives, a broad and coherent set of objectives, but they're willing to get behind any legislation that is good enough to move that broad set of objectives forward. So they're willing to be very flexible, seizing moments of opportunity to implement a broad-based strategy. And they're also integrated in the sense that they have a diversity of tools that they cultivate, ranging from sit-ins at congressional offices to street demonstrations to public education, legislative liaison, and lobbying.
And to supporting politicians.
So they're integrated in their objectives and in their actions. And I'd like Paula to put up a slide now. Yep. Yeah. This shows a structure for actions that we could take now in the midst of the COVID crisis. Actions to address immediate challenges and actions to prepare for the longer term post-crisis recovery and renewal of our economy and our society. And these issues are relevant domestically and internationally. They're all interlinked, but there are specific emphases in each of the four parts of this quadrant. And we'll see in Senator Markey's remarks how that plays out.
So are we back? Do you see me again? Okay. So we spoke to Senator Ed Markey, our senator from Massachusetts, who MAPA has endorsed because Ed Markey has been a transformational leader in Congress on peace issues, on domestic issues, on equity issues. And he has, you saw him in the Naomi Klein video when he endorsed with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, how he endorsed the Green New Deal. And we asked him to speak to our members, and we asked him questions in each of the four quadrants. So I'm going to move now to a, well, it's not what I wanted to do. I just lost. I want to move now to sharing my screen and showing you a videoed response that Senator Markey gave us to our questions as to how do we move forward in these four quadrants, domestically in the short term, domestically in the long term, internationally in the short term, and internationally in the long term. So here's Senator Markey's response.
Yeah. Oh, Massachusetts Peace Action. I hope that you're all safe. I hope you're all distancing yourselves so that we can protect.
I don't know why it stopped.
What happened, Paula?
I don't know. It's been playing just fine.
You better rewind them. Oh no, that's right. You got your intro that you want to skip. Yeah, just play again.
Sorry about that, guys. It was playing just fine 2 minutes ago.
Mm.
Well, I'm going to stop screen sharing.
Want me to try? Want me to try it?
Sure. Sure. And,
Hello, Massachusetts Peace Action. I hope that you're all safe. I hope you're all distancing yourselves so that we can protect not just your families, but everyone else's families. It's absolutely imperative in this time that we execute the single most perfect public health, public safety strategy to reduce the number of people who get sick, to reduce the number of people who pass away. So thank you all. Thank you for being the activists, which you are. Thank you for being the voice for peace. Thank you for being the voice for all of those who need more in our society. You are the people who are always there, always fighting for the right things, to standing up against those who would undermine justice in our society. And it means the world to me, but to everyone, that you are those people, those advocates for true justice within our society. So I know that there are a number of questions that you want me to answer, and I'd be more than willing to do so. So the first question is, the people's bailout campaign, and how does it relate to the president's stimulus bill and future stimulus packages? Well, the goal is to make sure that people and families are the beneficiaries of these trillions of dollars which we are going to be spending from the federal level. And we have to make sure that it's the workers inside of the small businesses who will receive the billions of dollars who get protected. We have to make sure that these unemployment checks do get to every worker so that we have 4 months of pretty much full pay in order to protect them and their families during this hard time. We have to make sure that it's the gig workers, that it's the self-contractors,
waiters and waitresses who also are able to receive something, which is a part of a people's approach to a bailout of our economy, to keep it afloat so that when this public health crisis passes, that they will be able to go back to their regular jobs, that they will be there, that our economy will have been protected. We just have to make sure that we do this with fairness and with justice for everyone. We know that the largest corporations are definitely going to have the most powerful lobbyists and the president of the United States, Donald Trump, standing up and fighting for them. But we have to make sure that it is the ordinary families across our country who get protected, that the poorest in our society, that they get protected as well. That's our job. That's what Massachusetts Peace Action does. It stands up for those who need help the most. The next question is, what are the unmet needs of health professionals and other essential workers? How can those needs be met? The healthcare workers in our country are real heroes. They're putting themselves in harm's way all day, every single day. They know that they're dealing with coronavirus. They know that they can get sick, and they know that it can be transmitted from them to their own families. So we have a responsibility to them to make sure that they get the protective gear which they need, that they're able to protect themselves so that they can protect all of our families and that they can protect their own families. That's why it's been an absolute disgrace that Donald Trump has not yet fully invoked the Defense Production Act. I called on him to do this, a month ago, to stand up and to tell our corporations that you must stop doing what you're doing and stop manufacturing the protective gear, the clothing, the ventilators, the N95 masks, which we need in order to fight this disease. He still hasn't fully invoked the Defense Production Act. It is an absolute abdication of responsibility for him not to be the commander-in-chief, not to be the person standing up for everyone in our country, but especially the healthcare workers and the other people who are on the front lines. Let's be honest, policemen, firemen, emergency medical technicians, the people in grocery stores who are standing there and continuing to work, the people who are on mass transit working still to make sure those systems work all across our country. People are doing what they need to do in order to protect all the rest of our families. We need Donald Trump to make sure that he does what he's supposed to do, to give all of these people the tools they need. And it has been just absolutely appalling to think that he doesn't see himself in that role of being the person who coordinates the whole country. And to listen to his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, talk about how all of that protective gear which they have in the federal government is our equipment, talking about the president and the White House rather than the people's protective gear, is an absolute insight into how they see our government and how they see the role of the presidency. And it is just something that has to end this year. He's got he's just got a few more months to go, and we have to mobilize to make sure that he does not get reelected. This is just a historic catastrophe that was largely avoidable if we had real leadership. The next question that we have here is, let me just scroll down here. It is, how would the Green New Deal support post-crisis recovery and strengthen our longer-term resilience? How can concerned citizens promote the Green New Deal? Well, we don't have any doubt in our minds that the science is correct, that the planet is dangerously warming, that it poses a threat to just about every single part of our planet, and that we need to have a massive response, creating millions of jobs and deploying the renewable energy technologies that will help to reduce the likelihood that we will see the same kind of catastrophic consequences as a result of climate change that we are now seeing as a result of the ignoring of the science with regard to pandemics. And we also have to make sure that as we create these millions of new jobs, that we do so with intersectionality. We do so paying attention to the frontline communities, minority communities, which are always harmed when we deal with the whole subject of pollution in our society. Black and brown people have always breathed different air than white people. That's just the way our society has always worked. We have to make sure that we implement a Green New Deal, that we do so with justice, that we do so ensuring that the jobs which are created are in minority communities, that they're at the front of the line of getting these jobs, and that we do this in a way that ensures that we reduce the amount of racial discrimination which exists within our society. That's why the Green New Deal is so powerful, and it's why Donald Trump, right from the day that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and I introduced it, has fought hard to make sure that it never gets implemented. But I will tell you something. Next January 20th, when the new president is sworn in, the Green New Deal is going to be right at the top of the agenda. And that's why we have to keep our energy levels high, because our day is coming in. In fact, Trump ignoring science on coronavirus is actually going to help us, because he's ignoring the science of climate change as well. And I think his ability to be able to con people into thinking that climate change is a hoax is absolutely being undermined by this coronavirus, which the president tried hard to convince people wasn't really going to be harmful to the American people. So the next question is, Iran's response to COVID-19 is undermined by U.S. sanctions. Should those sanctions be suspended? Well, the United States has a responsibility to be the moral leader of our planet, and that's why Senator Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and I last week wrote a letter demanding that Trump administration make practical changes to the sanctions regime, which he has imposed upon this country. We have to make sure that they can receive the medical tools which they need to fight the coronavirus. Iran is being hit extremely hard, and many innocent people are going to die if they don't get access to the medical technologies, to the medical services which they need. And moreover, if they don't receive it, then it's going to spread into other countries. And ultimately, it will come back to haunt the United States and the rest of the civilized world. So we really don't have a choice. We have to make sure that we put the tools which Iran needs to fight coronavirus into their hands. They were in denial, largely. They weren't responding correctly. But that doesn't mean that we should contribute to the kind of suffering which is going to be endured by the people of that country. We have a responsibility to look at that sanctions regime and to make all the practical changes which we have to make in order to guarantee that the tools are there for Iran to fight this disease. It is a moral responsibility of the United States to step in to help to accomplish that goal. And the next question is that the United States government has supported work on global health security for more than 2 decades. Should that work be expanded so that we can prevent or curb future pandemics? Well, in the last week, I was joined by several of my colleagues writing a letter to President Trump, calling on him to introduce a United Nations Security Council resolution that declares pandemics a clear threat to international security. My wife was a career 2-star admiral in the public health service. She joined right out of medical school, and she rose to become Assistant Surgeon General of the United States and the first ever Deputy Assistant Secretary for Women's Health. So that's what my wife has done with her whole career, trying to put in place the public health prevention programs that protect not only the United States, but the rest of the world, because each one of these diseases is just a plane ride away from coming to our country from any place in the world, which is why we have to work through the United Nations. We have to work through WHO. We have to have a global view of disease. Otherwise, we are going to have catastrophe after catastrophe, which winds up ultimately on our own doorstep. So that's the only way to think. And that's why the other senators and I sent that letter to Trump last week, so that he would know that there are people in our country who are going to be demanding that we play a much, much greater role in leading the world in the response to potential pandemic disease. It's the only way we can think about these issues. And by the way, climate change is part of this as well, because the warmer the planet gets, then we're going to see more and more insects, more and more changes that take place, causing the transferal of disease into parts of the world that it had never occurred before. That's just the reality of climate change. We know that to be true. So from my perspective, this is a critical moment in our nation's history. We now have to step up and be the leader. Donald Trump is not that leader, but the rest of us, and that's what mass peace action is all about. We have to be the leaders on this issue. We have to stand up. We have to fight. So thank you all so much for all of your leadership. Thank you for everything you do for our state and for our country and for our planet. Thank you for helping to lift our gaze to the constellation of possibilities for our families, for our state, for our country, and for our world. That's what you're all about. And over the next several weeks, over the next few months, just be safe. Take care of your families, take care of each other. We have to stay apart, but by staying apart, we come together. And I think it's absolutely critical that we be the leaders. So thank you for your leadership, and thank you for everything you do to make sure that America is a more peaceful, more prosperous, more healthy, and more just society every single day that Mass Peace Action is leading the charge. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Cole, for bailing us out. And thank you, Senator Markey, for framing for us a conversation where we can lift our gaze to what is possible. I thought I might show you how Markey's framing of the issue and integrating all the different pieces fit into the matrix that I just showed you on the previous slide. So I'm just going to share my screen for a moment. I see Eddie has a hand up. Can I keep going, Eddie, and just So do you all see this slide here? We have Senator Markey spoke about domestic issues, immediate responses. He spoke about the People's Bailout, which is a bill that is focused on creating stimulus money, or not stimulus, but it's a movement.
Yes.
To create the money that's the next round of money that's going to be coming through, to really focus on making sure that that's for the people, not for the corporations. He also spoke about the Defense Production Act, that he's trying to push the government to create the personal protective equipment that they need for the frontline workers, for the essential workers. So that's the domestic immediate response that Markey is talking about. And then in the domestic longer term response, he's thinking about the Green New Deal. He's thinking about the Green New Deal that talks about unions, and it talks about equity, and it talks about healthcare for all, and it talks about jobs that work for the climate, not against the climate. In international immediate responses, he put in the letter that he's writing to stop the sanctions in Iran so that they can continue, or they can mount a defense of for the health care, so that Iran doesn't sink into a health abyss with this coronavirus. And let's be clear, global health security is crucial for all of us in the long term, because when we have a pandemic like that in this global environment, no one is safe unless everyone is safe. That's why on the neighborhood level, we have to be sure that everyone is healthy, everyone is safe, and on the international level. So global health security and global climate action are both part of the integrated strategy that we're trying to develop, lifting our gaze so that we can focus on opportunities, focus on the ability to create a path forward through this crisis. So we're going to be breaking you down into small groups now, just for 10 minutes, to talk to some other people about what opportunities do you think exist? And think about opportunities that may already be there. There might be legislation that you know of that could help, or think of things that you'd like to create. What kind of opportunities do you want to create so that we can have an integrated strategy that covers all four bases? And the idea is, we're not going to do this alone, but we can help to coordinate a vision of a different future that we then work collaboratively across different groups, all across the country, to make this a reality. So Cole, you're going to split people up into groups of 5, and you'll have 10 minutes in your groups. And Cole, you should mute because you keep popping into the screen.
Okay, I thought I might have to talk to you about this matter, but okay, here goes.
Okay, but
Hello, is that Sharon?
Hi, sorry. Can I still join?
It wanted you to join breakout room 8. I don't know what you have to do on your end to make that happen. Is there a little join button or something?
I see a join breakout room, so I'll click on that.
Try that, yeah.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
I'm left back in the holding pen. Hi, Dean. Have you lost your breakout room, Dean? Oh.
We can't hear Edie and Rosalind. I mean,
you can't hear
They're marked
Edie
unmuted,
and Rosalind.
They're already unmuted, but I don't know why we can't hear them. Maybe
Say
the game
something,
on the
Edie and
microphone
Rosalind.
is wrong.
I don't know.
There's a little caret on the bottom left. They check it, they can, and the mute button, and they can check their microphone.
also, they could turn on the volume maybe of the mic. Maybe that's down. I don't know.
Probably the mic on their system.
Yeah, I'm not very computer savvy.
Well, even if you're computer savvy, you can't do it on somebody else's system.
Well, I don't know. That's what technical support is, I think.
Well, but they have special software. Okay. PCs are a little worse than Macs for it, so I know that.
I have a PC.
Yeah, they're a little
Luckily,
worse.
my husband is a software engineer, so that helps. It makes it easier.
Well,
I couldn't get the volume to work before.
Maybe you can figure out how to do it.
Rosalind's trying very hard. Edie, I don't hear anything.
Rosalind, can you hear us? Just nod your head yes.
Okay, what about
Okay.
Edie? Can you hear us?
Yeah.
So you have to put your thing down at the left, and there's a mute. There's a microphone that says mute, and next to it there's a little caret pointing up. Click on that caret. You should get a menu that says
The upward
test
sign.
microphone.
The upward sign that's next to the microphone. And it'll say select microphone, select speaker, test speaker. I don't know.
Test
All these
speaker
things
and
that are coming
microphone.
up. Maybe you and I should have a discussion, Kostya.
What I guess you guys could fall back on using the chat. There's a chat, and you can at least type things in there to your colleagues.
That's a good idea.
That's probably the best we can come up with right at the moment. Sorry.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm stumped. Hi, Louise. Came back to the holding pen, did you? Louise? Oh, it says Louise is connecting to audio. Hi, Rosalind. Well, there were some people that couldn't connect to audio. Rosalind is one of them. Louise is one of them. Not sure how many people that happened to, but it happened to some. So they could not be heard.
Rosalind, can you hear now?
Yeah.
So we had a couple of members of our group who couldn't hear anything the whole time.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Hi.
Hi. Who's that, Jonathan?
It's Jonathan.
Sounds like Jonathan.
I'm just unmuting everybody for a second so we can hear some feedback quickly. But
Right.
Our breakout work. We had a break at 5. It worked.
So you had your group work, Jonathan?
Yeah, it worked. It worked.
Great. So, you know, we're learning the technology. I think this is the first time we had a major meeting. We'll get better at it. I think it's really important to have everyone's voices heard, for us to have a chance to talk to and with each other. That's the only way we will create the vision and the power to work together. I had hoped, I didn't realize that Cole was going to put us into groups the instant I said I think we're going to go into groups soon, because I was trying to give you some direction.
Leadership is difficult.
So, you know, because sending people off into groups, okay, what are we doing here? And when I teach online, I have the ability to go into each room and say, check in, but because anyway, no more excuses, but let me just say that I'm hopeful that you spoke about what your hopes are, what you're working on, how that might contribute, and what we're hoping to do now. We only have about 5 minutes left. We could stay a little bit longer, is maybe hear from some of the groups if you had some great ideas. And even if you had some mediocre ideas, there's still ideas. There are no mediocre ideas. Every idea is a great idea. And one thing I want to do is invite you to send follow-up thoughts and proposals. Anything that you thought of, if it fits in the matrix that we gave you, or if it's a new idea that you think should be incorporated. And I'm going to put in the chat an email address and how to set up your message to us. And we will, Gordon and I will work on the messages that you send back, and we'll try to do a compilation, an integrated compilation of all the different ideas that people have, and all the different groups that we have to work with, to be in coalition with. So if I will do that and put that in the chat, and if anyone wants to, I don't see a way to read the manage participants. So I don't know if people want to raise their hand or if they just want to speak up. Take yourself off mute if you want to contribute to the conversation. How do people want to contribute?
I do that.
So just speak up.
Paula, I'm gonna, can you hear me, Paula?
We can hear you. Can everyone hear Jonathan? Yes.
So, for a moment, I want to speak as one of the co-chairs of Mass Peace Action. A fundamental core position we have is that if we don't cut the military budget, right, we can't get a Green New Deal to solve that.
Absolutely.
If that wasn't in your grid, I would request that be explicitly.
Absolutely.
Cutting the egregious Pentagon budget is absolutely key. That's a vote of committees of Congress. It's not something abstract. Every year, the House and Senate Armed Services Committees have to vote that. There's a target there. The military-industrial complex has beat us back, every year for the last 20 years, but now is a new environment, as you point out, as Naomi points out, as Markey points out. And so we got to keep that front and center.
Brief comment. Great point, Jonathan.
Thank you.
Yeah.
The present COVID crisis is showing us in spades that our budgeting priorities for national security are completely out of whack. And that gets directly to your point.
And the reason it wasn't in the slide, in the PowerPoint, was because it wasn't something that Markey said. I was just pulling out things as examples of what he said, but absolutely, it totally belongs there, both in short term and long term. Yeah, other comments?
This is John McDougall. Can I say one thing quickly?
Sure, please.
In our group, I'm by the way, hi everybody.
Hi,
Great, thank you so much to especially Gordon and Cole and to Paula. Our group, there were at least 3 of the 5 of us who felt very strongly that the top priority is to beat Trump in November. It's absolutely crucial. And those of us from Massachusetts, almost as high, is to make sure that Markey himself wins in the primary, hopefully in September. Thanks.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons we wanted to give him an opportunity to speak to the group and more broadly. Thank you, John.
So Paula, this is Lynn Sherman. I was in the group with John. I will say though, being a new person to your group, I think engaging youth, and people of diversity, like this is a lovely group. I've never been here, but really what helped AOC is having a really diverse coalition. So I think it's so critical to think about how this group could interact with younger people, more diverse people. I think that could really be something that could help to strengthen and grow the group.
Absolutely. So thank you very much, Lynn. That's absolutely right. And what we're currently doing is we're working with the Sunrise Movement, which is the youth movement that's behind the Green New Deal. And we will continue to work with them and cooperate with them. And I encourage all of you to find out and learn about the Sunrise Movement. And there's no question that this can and should be, and probably will be, a youth-led movement. And we need to think about how we can be most supportive. Thank you.
I wonder if I could just add something to the conversation.
Yeah, Tony, hi.
Hi, how are you? Thank you for putting this together, Gordon and Paula and Cole. I just wanted to add something about the present bailouts.
Yes.
I think that we need to focus a teeny bit of energy on how those bailouts are, and this was said earlier, but helping large corporations at the expense of workers. And I was hoping that we might, I'm going to give one example and then looking for a suggestion. The example is, at least what I have heard, is that the cruise industry is going to be up for getting a significant amount of money. Well, what I heard from folks in another setting was that there's only one of the cruise lines that actually has its headquarters in the United States. That most of them have their headquarters in other countries that pay no taxes. Therefore, they pay no taxes to the United States for their as a corporation, and yet they do want our tax dollars. And so that led me to think about, is there any way, or anybody know about a clearinghouse that might be pulling together exact kind of examples of where corporations are benefiting from our tax dollars at the expense of either workers or the country in general. I mean, you've already had the example of funding, giving polluters a lot of money. But I do think it'd be nice if anybody knows of a clearinghouse, because those kind of examples can be used for people who might want to raise serious questions about how this $2.2 trillion is being used.
Great question. James, do you have an answer? That's a great question, Tony. And if no one has an answer here, we can, if you do have an answer, we could put it in the chat.
Okay.
And we can send that question to us.
Yeah.
I'm sure the Chuck Collins group is working on that. And they put out a weekly newsletter about this type of information. So that's one place. If people don't get that, can figure out how to set that up. But they have all kinds of research on this type of issue.
Yeah. What's the name of the group?
Equality something.
Well, it's the Institute
So find out and let us send it to us, please, so we can add.
What is it, Jonathan?
I think it's just inequality.org.
Yeah, inequality.org.
Okay.
Duly noted.
Duly noted. Someone else want to speak?
There's one other organization, I think it's called United for a Fair Economy.
Yeah, that's the one I've heard, and I thought that was common.
Yeah. So this is Mary Ellen Stack.
Hi, Mary Ellen.
Hi. So in our group, we were discussing, we actually came at a similar idea of reaching out to other people from a more local perspective.
Yes.
So we started off talking about reaching out to people we know, maybe engaging in some mutual aid, but also really thinking hard to engage people from different political persuasions,
yes,
certainly youth, but also thinking of reaching out to local labor leaders,
yes,
and getting those kinds of messages out so that we can widen the message and have the ideas that are handy, bring them closer to the people that we encounter every day.
Absolutely, that's wonderful. And in fact, we can't do it all. We can think about who else to bring into this coalition and have a coalition where we're each supporting each other. That's how we leverage our power together. So what we need to think about, I think, is how and with whom we will be in coalition and how we can meaningfully support youth, support labor, support neighborhood organizations, support the watchdog organization, and put it together in a meaningful, integrated whole, because it's all part of the same package. So maybe it's a new deal for the 21st century. Maybe it's a Green New Deal, and maybe it's a new deal for the 21st century. Nancy, you're okay. So it's
Just hoping I could say one thing very quickly.
Yes, please. I'm happy to stay another 10 minutes, whatever people want.
So in our group, we were group one, and others raised this issue, so I'm not taking any credit for it. The conversation was really very interesting. But, defeating Trump is one thing, and there are a few things that we need to do. If Biden is indeed the candidate, and I saw it in the chat box here too, that we need to get to him now and talk to him about this. He may be hopeless. I am not 100% sure that he's hopeless, but I worry that he is in terms of these issues. And we need to also get to Bernie so that whoever is the nominee, everybody's behind that nominee while we're still pushing that nominee to the left.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And here's what I think. The Democratic Convention isn't until August. Look at how many things have changed in the last 2 weeks. Nothing is a done deal at this point. Nothing is a done deal at this point. Let's keep hope alive, and let's work on our values and build our coalition. And that includes working within the Democratic Party. I mean, I've got a meeting at 7 with the Cambridge Democratic Committee. It's like the work never stops. But yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Someone else?
I wanted to say something. I guess it's more.
Hi, Ellen.
Hi, Paula. I'm wondering about Hungary and Orban, and whether that's on the horizon somehow for a number of places, including here. In other words, maybe at the end of all of our signatures on our emails, we should write something like protect habeas corpus, you know, save the Constitution, because everybody's saying, well, this is what he's going to do. He's just going to delay it, and then he's going to take over. And there's a lot of talk like that, and we're seeing these things happen in other countries. And he does talk like, and when I say he, everybody knows who I'm talking about. He does act as if he's already made the decision to make all our decisions for us. And so I think with Markey, we need one of our senators to start to pick up the protection of the Constitution in some way, or work with groups that are considering that as an important issue of the day. Maybe. What do you think? I guess I should ask it as a question.
I mean, no question.
Well,
yeah.
Please, Ellen or anyone else, send that in your suggestions, and we'll make sure it's in our compilation of recommendations. And MAPA, of course, is a wonderful vehicle for bringing these issues to the attention of our delegation, our congressional delegation, and others.
You know, a key principle, Ellen and everyone, of international security in the 21st century is that we are interdependent and we're mutually vulnerable. And nothing says it more than being in the midst of a deadly pandemic. So we're in this together and internationally. So I see that it's we've gone over time. If anyone wants, Rosalie, please, you have to unmute.
Sorry. I'm unmuted.
You're unmuted, and you're going to have the last word.
Okay. I just want to say, we are trying to influence, say, the Sunrise Movement. I am, in terms of putting the peace agenda out there as part of what they're doing. But I think we as a peace movement have to really pay attention to environmental activists, including the Sunrise Movement, because I think sometimes we're putting forward stuff that strategically doesn't make sense to them, not in terms of values, but in terms of strategy. So I think we just have to be very careful about that to realize it's totally a two-way street. And I encourage everybody to take the Sunrise Movement course, because it's really about spreading out organizing.
Absolutely, totally. Thank you, Rosalie.
Okay.
Cole or Brian, did you want to have any last words?
No, Paula, you're doing great. I don't feel the need to add anything.
Okay.
Thank you for everyone.
Yes, great job. Wonderful. Well, good to see you all, and fantastic work.
Right. Thank you. So I want to thank you, because I've been saying to people that I've been on this roller coaster of despair and hope, and this meeting has given me hope. So I feel like despite the darkness of this moment, we have unprecedented opportunities to transform what was politically impossible a month ago and make it politically inevitable. So together, we can do this. As the Queen said, we're in this together, and we will triumph. Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Stay safe.
Stay safe. Stay safe. Thank you.
Bye.